You won't see cheerleaders at the Major League Baseball games, but you certainly can expect them to be rallying the fans on the sidelines of matches in Taiwan and Japan. It's all part of the unique experience that's driving the baseball industry. Japan's professional baseball league is the second wealthiest behind the U.S., and it's growing. So how has baseball become such a money spinner in this part of the world? I'm Divya Gopalan, and you're watching Connected on Taiwan Plus. For insight into the global baseball economy and why the game has hit a home run in Japan and Taiwan, we are joined by baseball historian and author Robert K. Fitz from New York. He's also the author of 11 books on Japanese baseball, and his most recent one is In the Japanese Ballpark, Behind the Scenes of Nippon Professional Baseball. Great to have you with us, Robert. I just want to start with, basically, you've written a series of books, almost coming up to a dozen, but in the course of your latest book, what surprised you the most, or what did you learn that was new about Japanese baseball?
Well, I wrote this book because I'm a baseball historian, and all my previous work has been about the history of the game. And I was sitting watching a game a couple years ago, and I realized as I watched the game fold around me and the people working in the stadium, I really had no idea what happens behind the scenes to put on a baseball game, because it is, of course, entertainment. So I wrote this book to try to learn for myself the behind the scenes aspects of Japanese baseball. So I learned an awful lot. One surprising thing is actually kind of difficult because I had so much to learn. I think if I had to guess one thing, or if I had to pick out one thing, I would focus on the beer girls. In Japan, unlike in the United States, when you want a beer, you do not stand in line at a counter and order a beer. Instead, a young lady comes up to you and she's wearing a keg on her back, and she'll pour you a draft ice cold beer. And I interviewed two beer girls for this book, and I asked them about their jobs, what it was like. And I think what impressed me the most and what I was most surprised about was how hard they work. They carry a 40-pound keg of beer on their backs for 3 to 4 hours every home game. So that's 70 games throughout the season. And they're running up and down the stairs for these hours. And when they go to bed, they just fall asleep like right away. And I think just the physical exhaustion of that job is one of the things that surprised me the most.
It's almost like they're working much harder, or they need a lot more physical endurance than the actual players. That's so interesting. And they're all part of this baseball economy that has emerged in Japan, quite a unique one. So going back to, you said you were a baseball historian. So just to give our audience a little bit of context, when did baseball really start gaining traction in Japan as becoming an economic superpower, or at least an economic contributor?
It's a really good question. So baseball was introduced in Japan in 1872, but it remained an amateur game, played at the high school, college level, and complete amateur game all the way up until 1935, when the first professional league was founded. I would say it didn't really become a substantial economic endeavor probably until the 1950s, the late 1950s. By that time, the league became more mature. They had stars. You start to get television coming in soon in the 1960s, and the games are televised, and you start getting more endorsements happening. And I think that's when you start seeing real economics of Japanese baseball take off.
And aside from the beer girls and the cheerleaders, which we will get to later, what would you say is the biggest difference between Japan's baseball league and the major leagues in the U.S.?
Differences. There's so many differences. I would say on the economic side, the biggest difference is the Japanese teams are owned by corporations that produce another product. The teams are traditionally advertising mechanisms to advertise this other products, such as the Yomiuri Giants, of course, own the Yomiuri newspaper, and they have always used the Giants to advertise the newspaper and to promote newspaper sales. In the United States, the teams are economic entities unto themselves. The purpose is to make profit by playing baseball and producing the entertainment of baseball. So that's the biggest economic difference. As terms of baseball culture, there's all sorts of differences, stemming to the ties between Japanese baseball and the martial arts that go back, almost 150 years at this point, where they emphasize hard practices, not only to promote skill levels, but also to promote kind of what they would call the fighting spirit of the game. So that's the biggest difference on the field.
So Shohei Ohtani, arguably currently the best baseball player in the world, came from the Nippon Ham Fighters, I believe,
Yes.
in Hokkaido. What was their product?
Their product is ham.
Okay.
Japanese ham, right?
Now, before we move on to discuss the specifics, let's take a look at some of the global baseball market stats. Market research agency Future Data Stats value the global baseball league market at just over $26 billion US in 2024. They projected the market to grow at a compound annual growth rate of around 5% to reach almost $35 billion US by 2030. So in your latest book, Robert, you've endeavored to speak to and interview all the different players off the field that contribute to a baseball or the baseball industry. Can you tell us about all the different moving parts that creates this big machine or helps this big machine move?
Sure. Well, at the most basic level, you have the people who are on the diamond, who people come to watch. And those are the players, the managers, and the umpire. And then right behind them are the people in the dugout who allow the game to proceed. And that would be the coaches, interpreters, trainers, keep the players, of course, physically fit. And then you go to a next level, which are the people who are at the stadium in the game, behind the scenes, helping the team. And these are data analysts, for example. These would be the medical staff that you have. And then you have all the people who work in the stadium, such as the beer girls, the cheerleaders, the mascots, the people who sell the food, people who clean up afterwards, people who make the actual event work. And then I think one of the things that was most interesting to me is talking to the people in the front office who actually run the business baseball, from the merchandising all the way up to the general managers who bring the team together, both on the field by selecting the best players for their team, and also kind of off the field by working on the marketing strategies for the corporation as a whole. And I was also lucky enough to interview an ex-commissioner who, of course, is in charge of the league and trying to make sure everything is run smoothly because, of course, the teams all have competing interests.
So interesting. We can't talk about baseball without talking about one of the game's greatest players who happens to be a Japanese and playing for the Los Angeles Dodgers. Shohei Ohtani is not only known for his superior pitching and batting skills, virtually unheard of in the pro league, but also a first how he has structured his salary payout. His then record-breaking $700 million 10-year Major League Baseball deal in 2023 pays him only $2 million a year until 2033. Now the rest, the remaining 97% or $680 million of his deal with the Dodgers is deferred and will be paid out at $68 million a year from 2034 to 2043. Now, this is so interesting. Robert, what can you tell us about this deal? And is it the first of its kind?
You know, it's actually not the first of its kind. I did a little background research, and as far as I can tell, the first deferred salary that I was able to find happened in the late 1970s. There was a superstar by the name of Dave Parker played for the Pittsburgh Pirates. He just got into the Baseball Hall of Fame this past year. And he was the first $1 million baseball player. And part of his salary was deferred until I believe it almost a decade after his contract is going to expire. So that happened in the late 70s. There were a number of deferred salaries in the 80s and the 90s. It is more popular now, and I believe there's something about 7 or 8 of the current Los Angeles Dodgers actually have deferred salaries, and some of them up in the hundreds of millions of dollars. But Ohtani does have the largest deferred salary of all time.
Why would players agree to this, and what benefit does it have for the baseball team to do this?
Let's take the team first. The advantage is that they don't have to spend the money right now. There is a it's not Major League Baseball doesn't have a salary cap, but what it does have is if a team has a certain amount spent on salary, they start to have fines. We'll call them fines attached to the team, so where they have to bring money back into the league. So by keeping their salaries of their players down, they have to pay less money into the system. That's one. The other one is they only have so much money they can actually give out to salaries each year, just in terms of operating budget. So by deferring it and, of course, investing the money, they hope that they will come out ahead. That, of course, allows them to hire more players, more superstars. And like you said, the Dodgers have 7 or 8 deferred stars already. So they're not paying these players their full value this year. It'll be all over the next few decades. Now, the players do that because they get more money overall. It's really that simple. They come out quite ahead. As long as they don't need the money right away, they're much better deferring it and getting paid more money over a longer period.
Does this happen in Japan?
I don't believe so. They do have a different economic structure. The average salary in Nippon professional baseball is about $300,000, and that is less than half the minimum salary for a Major League Baseball player. So we're talking about completely different economic structure. Or should we say, if it's like a different economic universe. It's so much smaller than Major League Baseball.
One of the issues that the recent World Series final between the Dodgers and the Blue Jays highlighted was the pay gap that you're seeing in the MLB. Is that an issue in Japan, from what you know?
Yes and no. It's not as big an issue in the United States when you're talking about salaries in the tens of millions of dollars. These don't exist in Japan. But there are teams like the Hiroshima Carp that have less money than teams like the Yomiuri Giants and the Hanshin Tigers. The Carp are famous for not signing free agents and letting their homegrown stars leave the team to find better pastures. So there is a disparity between the teams in terms of wealth and ability to sign free agents, and the ability to bring in foreign players at high salaries too.
I think, no matter where you are in the world and whoever you're playing for, the ultimate goal is to play for the MLBs if you are a pro baseball player. Are we seeing any kind of trends when it comes to that? I mean, we talk about Shohei Ohtani, but how much has that inspired other Japanese players to reach for the MLBs? And has that, would you say, helped baseball in Japan in any way?
That's a great question. And I asked that question of just about everybody I interviewed, even from the people who just work behind the scenes, like the coaches. But what's the future of Japanese baseball if all the good players are coming to Japan? So it's a complicated question, so I'll kind of break it down a little bit. As I mentioned before, the average salary in Japan is $300,000, where the minimum salary in the major leagues is, I think it's over $700,000 now. So almost every player in Japan would get a pay raise if they can come to the United States. So economically, the incentives are to come to the major leagues. What we also have is Hideo Nomo was the first modern player to play in the major leagues, and he came over in 1995. So since 1995, Japanese players in the major leagues, and I'd say more importantly, Major League Baseball has been on TV in Japan since that time. So kids or players, young players today, young professional players, grew up watching Japanese play in the major leagues. So as small children, they could say that that could be me. That's my goal. My goal is to become a major league baseball player. So I think from a young age, the top players want to turn professional, but also many of them, their ultimate goal is to go play in the majors. Um, Now, has Shohei Ohtani's success even increased that? Probably. To see that the best player in the world is now Japanese. There is no inferiority complex among Japanese players the way there was, say, 30, 40 years ago, where people thought that a Japanese player could not play in the major leagues. We know that's nonsense now. So I think a good professional player says, yeah, I can do that too, and tries to move to the major leagues if they feel comfortably culturally when they get the opportunity.
Okay, before we continue, I have some more stats for you. In 2023, Ohtani became the highest paid athlete by signing a $700 million deal. But in terms of annual payment, he's no longer the highest paid athlete as per the Forbes list in 2025. Topped by soccer star Cristiano Ronaldo, the Japanese ranks ninth with an estimated 102.5 million US dollars over the past 12 months. But two places above him at seventh place is another Major League Baseball star, New York Mets outfielder Juan Soto, with 114 million US dollars. Now, the 26-year-old Dominican signed a $765 million 15-year contract last December, surpassing Ohtani's record-breaking deferred contract. So much money. But a lot of this, a lot of money for the baseball economy comes from merchandise and baseball cards. So first, let's go to merchandise here and talk about Ohtani's appeal. Like how much does that play into the, or how much does it reflect the popularity of a player if their merchandise does well?
Well, I mean, I believe I heard stats that through endorsements and merchandise, Ohtani was making $50 million a year. Maybe it's even more than that. So he's making one of the largest Major League Baseball salaries just through his endorsement deals. So obviously, you can make an awful lot of money through good endorsements and through merchandise. I believe that the merchandise in MLB is shared by Major League Baseball Corporation. I don't know the exact structures of the deal, but I'm pretty sure that if you buy a Ohtani jersey, he gets a cut, but Major League Baseball gets the biggest cut of that. Not positive about that, however. My understanding is in Japan, the players also make a fair amount of money from the merchandising. They can have private deals, but they're also very likely to go through the team, where the team gets a healthy cut of the players' merchandise as well.
And now, through the years, baseball cards have been a feature, whether you're in the U.S. or not. Collecting MLB baseball, Major League Baseball players' cards, and I believe you used to collect, but you've also collected Japanese cards, and in fact, even created one, from what I believe. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. So I grew up as a baseball card collector as a kid in the 1970s. I enjoyed collecting very much, and when I was in a graduate school, actually, I was at what we call in the United States a flea market. I don't know if in Taiwan whether they have the same expression, but it's kind of a used junk market. And there were some old baseball cards there dating back to the early 20th century, and they were very cheap, and I bought them. And that started me thinking about collecting baseball cards again. And I started collecting again, and that would have been in my mid 20s. And I lived in Japan in 1993, 1994, and I started collecting Japanese baseball cards when I was there. And part of the fun for the 2 years I was there was going to these flea markets, often held in shrines on the weekends, and different antique stores looking for old Japanese baseball cards, which helped teach me about the history of the game. Because once I got the cards, I wanted to learn who the players were. Well, eventually, I got so many of them, I started getting duplicates. And what am I going to do with them? So when eBay first started opening up in the, I guess it was what, about 96, maybe 97, somewhere in there, I started an early eBay store selling Japanese baseball cards. And it's really more of a hobby. It's not a real business, but I've been doing it since that time.
Right. And are they, would you say baseball cards contribute to the overall baseball economy, or it's more of a hobby, particularly in Japan, as opposed to spinning money for those who are quite passionate about it?
Um, yeah, it contributes to the baseball economy, but probably in Japan, not hugely. Baseball card collecting is a growing hobby in Japan, but it is nowhere near what it is in the United States, which is $1 billion industry. It's certainly in the maybe millions of dollars in Japan, but it is growing. The exact economic structure of the baseball cards in Japan, I'm not familiar with. I believe that the contracts are mostly made with the teams and with the league rather than the individual players, however.
Um, Talking about making money for baseball, one of the biggest money earners is streaming now, and television deals. You know, there's big money to be made there. Um, How is the MLB making money from places in Asia and supporting the Major League Baseball, would you say? Or how much of the MLB's, I guess, revenues come from streaming and outside broadcasts?
I can't give you numbers, but what I can say is there's no doubt that the Dodgers made a strategic decision to move into Asia to capture the Asian market in baseball. And they went out by signing Ohtani and Yamamoto and Sasaki and signing big television deals in Japan and making sure their memorabilia, especially their jerseys and their ball caps, were available all over Japan. So I don't have the numbers, but I would bet that the Dodgers have probably paid for their players, their Japanese players' salaries already through their merchandising and, more importantly, their broadcast rights in Japan this year.
Before we continue, can you turn around and tell me who signed those baseball bats behind you and balls?
I can. Part of my collection. This one I picked up this summer. Let's see if we can get it in the camera. That's
Yeah, we
Ichiro
do. We can see
Suzuki.
it.
Yeah, as you may know, Ichiro Suzuki was inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown this summer, and I was working for the Hall of Fame in an exhibit on Japanese baseball that they have, and they just put up. And so I was lucky enough to be there and meet Ichiro this summer for the first time. And so that's a souvenir of that particular weekend. The balls are various. I have a couple of collections. One is I like to collect signed balls from the teams that have American teams that have traveled to Japan. So some balls are from them. And I also try to collect a signed ball of all the Japanese players who've played in the major leagues. But I'm missing my Ohtani. They're running over $1,000 right now, and I think I'll just pass on that.
Oh, there's time yet. There is time yet. Now, now coming back to Japanese baseball, one of the interesting features are cheerleaders, which you don't see in the U.S. And from one of your interviews, you said when in the course of the research of your book, one of your most interesting interviews was with a cheerleader. Can you tell us why?
Because to be honest with you, I didn't expect anything out of the interview. When I was trying to figure out what job To interview the 30 people in my book, I had to first get access to the people, and I also had to pick what jobs I wanted to interview. And access was the most difficult part. A lot of teams didn't allow their employees to speak to me. Now, it wasn't personal, it was just because I was a media person writing a book. Um, so I thought, well, cheerleaders are a little different. I should talk to a cheerleader, but I wasn't really expecting much because I didn't really know what they did. I just kind of thought they just danced on top of the dugout. But when I went and I interviewed the person who is in charge of the cheerleaders for the Nippon Ham Fighters, I found it fascinating. The cheerleaders' job is more than just dancing. They act as a community outreach. They go out into the schools. They open up stores. Their idea is to bring fans into the ballpark by going out into the community and creating more of a baseball community. Um, I thought that was very interesting, and I thought the life of a cheerleader was kind of interesting. For example, up until about 10 years ago, the cheerleaders weren't paid. It was a volunteer occupation. And they finally, as they became more popular, now get a small salary, but they all have to supplement their salaries by working at dance academies, which are set up by the different teams where girls, yeah, very young girls usually, will come in for lessons in dancing and lessons on how to be a cheerleader. Um, and so that's the way they make their ends meet. And I just thought the whole lifestyle was different from what I'm used to seeing in baseball, and just plain interesting.
Here in Taiwan, some of the cheerleaders are more popular than some of the biggest teams here. And I think social media has had a huge part to play in that. So you talk about the cheerleaders having perhaps not a massive salary, and how much are they contributing to the popularity of baseball in Japan, though? Would you say, or is it, unlike in Taiwan, very much more baseball aficionados who go to baseball games rather than for the entertainment?
Wow, that's a really great question. Um, I get the feeling, now this is just my opinion, that when I go to Japanese games, that the people are there to watch their team play. Um, and they really care what happens on the field, whether the team wins and loses, and how their players do. I get the feeling that more people in the United States will go to a baseball game for the overall entertainment value. Yeah, they want their home team to win, but they may not really know the stats. They may not even know the names of all nine guys on the field. Now, I'm not talking about most of the fans, but I just think there's a larger number of those people in the U.S. who just go for the entertainment of going to a baseball game, where I find the Japanese fans to be a little bit more passionate and more knowledgeable than U.S. fans. So I think the cheerleaders, for the most part, are not a major attraction. However, they're a welcome addition. They're entertaining. They're fun. Um, and one of the things I did learn from this chapter is they're becoming celebrities. Now they have their own trading cards. If you go to most of the stadiums, you will see merchandise in the team stores with the individual cheerleaders' pictures and names on them. So you can collect your favorite cheerleaders merchandise. So they are definitely becoming more popular, more commercialized, and a bigger part of the game. And I think you just mentioned that in Taiwan, I guess some of the cheerleaders are as popular as the players. I don't think we're there yet in Japan, but maybe someday.
Right. And finally, Robert, given the fact, and again, this comes from a point of your observation, given the fact that one of the world's best players is Asian, and that baseball marketing and the money generated has huge potential, why do you think it hasn't taken off in Asia? And do you think there is potential for it to go further than Taiwan and Japan?
Yeah, I think there's potential, and I think we see some of it. Why it hasn't taken off in Asia, I think, has to do with historic reasons. Baseball was brought to Japan at a very early time. Like I said, 1872 it was introduced. It was brought to Taiwan and Korea from the Japanese. Um, Places like India, of course, were originally a British colony. Um, Most of China was split up. There was not an American colony. So even though the game was actually played in China very early, earlier than Japan, it just never really settled in, and there wasn't a long enough American presence for the game to really be played there. Um, but what we see are stronger national teams, especially in China. And I believe baseball is starting to expand in India. India, of course, cricket is the main sport, and it's so good that it may be a tough battle to make baseball too popular there. Um, so I know the goals of a lot of the Japanese teams are to expand their influence in Asia so that more Asian fans, especially Taiwanese, are coming to Japan to watch baseball and coming on baseball tourism trips. That's something the number of the front office people mentioned to me when I was interviewing.
Robert K. Fitz, baseball historian and author of In the Japanese Ballpark, Behind the Scenes of Nippon Professional Baseball. It's been great to have you on the program.
Thanks so much. I've had a lot of fun.